Ozzy Osbourne's death. 2 weeks after the Black Sabbath rocker passed away at age 76, the New York Times confirmed that his official cause of death was a heart attack.
Ozzy Osbourne's very public memorial in England, his cause of death was just revealed to be a heart attack.
Tony Iommi recalled Ozzy Osbourne's final moments after their farewell show, sharing how Ozzy visited his bandmates in a wheelchair to say goodbye.
What does it mean to leave a legacy? Can a voice truly outlive the body that carried it? When the lights fade and the stage falls silent, what remains? Ozzy Osbourne's roar was more than music. It was a force that refused to die. This is the story of a man whose voice shattered time, whose spirit still burns in the hearts of millions. Tony Iommi described the silence as something heavier than any sound he'd ever heard. When he woke the morning after Ozzy's passing, he couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe properly. It was like the weight of decades of memories suddenly collapsed on top of him. The date, July 22nd, 2025, became carved into him forever. It wasn't just a date, it was the day everything changed. The final song.
Final song for you. I just want to say to you on behalf of the guys in Black Sabbath and myself, that your support over the years.
Sharon Osbourne said it happened the way Ozzy always hoped it would. Peaceful, undramatic in his sleep. He wasn't hooked to machines or trapped in a hospital. He was home, surrounded by his family. She held his hand as his breathing slowed. The children were nearby. It wasn't a moment filled with noise. It was still, like a candle slowly flickering out. That was Ozzy's exit. When the news broke, the world froze. Fans flooded social media. Radio stations halted regular programming to play tribute sets. Even people who weren't fans paused, aware that someone legendary had left the stage for good. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, who had become a symbol of rebellion and resilience, had died. It wasn't unexpected. He had been battling Parkinson's for years. The spinal surgeries, the health scares, the tremors, everyone saw him growing weaker. But still, no one thought he'd be gone that night. Tony remembered a message Ozzy sent just hours before. It was short. "I'm really tired, mate." 4 words. No build-up, no explanation. But Tony knew it was final. Not just physical exhaustion. It was the soul giving in. But Ozzy had held on for something, a promise to himself, a farewell he needed to give. That moment had happened 2 weeks earlier, on July 5th, the last performance.
Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, delivered an unforgettable final performance from a black throne in Birmingham.
On that day, 45,000 people packed Villa Park Stadium in Birmingham. The show was titled Back to the Beginning. To fans, it looked like a celebration, a homecoming. Ozzy returning to where it all began. But it wasn't a new chapter. It was the last page. For that performance, a custom throne had been designed. It was leather, black, winged like something out of mythology. It had to be strong. Ozzy could no longer stand for extended periods. The years had taken that from him. But what he still had, his voice, he gave that night. Even seated, his presence commanded the entire stadium. Tony had made it clear that Ozzy didn't want a massive farewell tour. No long list of cities, no press tours or photo ops. Just one night in Birmingham. One performance, one real goodbye. Sharon confirmed that fans had hoped for more. Some thought maybe there'd be a short run, a series of UK dates. But Ozzy had already made up his mind. This was it, the final bow. That night, the original Black Sabbath lineup reunited.
The Black Sabbath singer working as one of the band's roadies.
It had been decades since they'd played in that formation. They didn't rehearse for perfection. The goal wasn't to impress critics. It was about connection, reclaiming what they had built together all those years ago. There were no explosions or visual effects, just music, just raw, exposed emotion. Bill Ward said later that it didn't matter how many mistakes were made. What mattered was the love. And that was everywhere. In every note Ozzy sang, in every beat, in every nod across the stage. Ozzy was frail, and it was visible. The set list was arranged with care. Tony made sure there were breaks, moments for Ozzy to rest and catch his breath. But Ozzy never once asked to stop. Not once. James Hetfield, watching from the side, said he could feel something shift in the air.
James, hey, can't you do this thing there? And it's like, I would never have thought of that. And yes, I can try that. Give me a day and I'll come back and it'll be work.
Slash, who also played that night, said it wasn't even about music anymore. It was about life, about watching someone give everything they had, knowing it might be the last time. When Ozzy sang Paranoid, something broke loose. Fans sang louder, some wept. That song, which had been an anthem for decades, became something else entirely that night. It wasn't nostalgia, it was a goodbye. The lineup of guests was unreal. Metallica, Slayer, Guns N' Roses, Tool, Pantera. All there, not to compete, but to honor him. But despite the presence of rock's giants, the night belonged entirely to Ozzy. He didn't dominate the stage through energy. He didn't need to. His mere presence, the effort he made, the voice that still somehow roared through the pain, that was enough. After the concert ended, there was no after-party, no press room, no crowd backstage. Ozzy was wheeled quietly to his dressing room, too exhausted to stand. But before that, he stopped by Tony's room. Smiling faintly, he asked, "It went all right, didn't it?" Tony couldn't respond. Words felt pointless. Those close to Ozzy knew his condition had worsened. Rehearsals had been difficult. There were moments when he'd forget lyrics. His body trembled. His posture was hunched. But he still cracked jokes, still tried to lighten the mood. There was something in his eyes, a flicker that told them he knew. Behind the curtain, it wasn't about hitting every note or putting on a flawless show. It was about reconnecting, about brotherhood. It was about that final act of grace. One last moment with the music, the band, and the fans.
Prince of Darkness singing from his throne, performing for the last time ever with a band whose influence has echoed across generations of music.
Tony was certain that Ozzy had known. Maybe not the exact date, but the sense. That internal awareness that this was his time. And so, when he had asked Tony for that one last night in Birmingham, there was no question, no hesitation. He didn't want to end in a hospital bed. He didn't want wires and machines to be his final audience. He wanted the fans, the people who'd screamed his name in arenas for decades. He wanted to sing, to hear their voices one last time. And he did. That night raised 140 million euros for Parkinson's research and Birmingham Children's Hospital. But that wasn't the true legacy. The value wasn't in the donation, it was in the moment. The throne he sat on wasn't just for comfort, it was a symbol. It stood for everything he had endured and survived. The man who once ran across stages shirtless, leaping, screaming, now sat still, broken in body but not in soul. That throne made him look like a king, but not a king of glamour or pride, a king of scars, a king of pain, a king of resilience. And as the final note echoed through the night, and he raised one trembling hand to the sky, the stadium fell silent. There were no speeches, no encore, just a hand in the air. The echo after darkness. In the days following Ozzy's passing, Birmingham became something else. Fans gathered outside his childhood home in Aston. Candles were lit, posters taped to brick walls, and handwritten notes left on doorsteps. Local pubs played Sabbath on repeat. Churches, mosques, and synagogues all mentioned his name. In the silence of mourning, Ozzy's voice echoed everywhere. Tony stayed in Birmingham for several weeks. He couldn't leave. Every street carried a sound, a memory. The markets where they once joked about escaping, the alleys where they smoked and planned music that no one believed in. It was as if the city itself had paused, still reeling from the loss. Sharon had moved quietly through the grief. She didn't want cameras or interviews. She said everything she needed to say the night before the show. That night, she whispered to Ozzy, "You did it, my love. You went out your way." And he smiled. The band members, Tony, Geezer, Bill, met privately after the funeral. There were no plans for tributes or albums. They just wanted to talk. They didn't speak about business, only about the boy they met all those years ago. The one who once borrowed a PA system by climbing into a club through a window. The one who couldn't read lyrics off a paper but could scream them into eternity. Ozzy's funeral was small, not because he wasn't loved, but because he didn't want a spectacle. Only family, close friends, and a few musicians. The ceremony took place at a small chapel outside the city. No press was allowed, no live stream. Sharon had personally arranged every detail. A single guitar rested on his coffin. No gold, no spotlight. Tony spoke briefly. He didn't prepare anything. He just looked at the casket and said, "Thank you for giving us a reason to keep going." Then he sat down. In the crowd were legends, artists from across genres, Elton John, Paul McCartney, Dave Grohl. But none of them took the stage. They just sat, heads bowed, listening. A young girl from Birmingham sang Changes a cappella. Her voice cracked in places. No one minded. Everyone cried. After the service, Sharon invited everyone back to their family home. No press, no security lines, just guitars propped against walls, sandwiches on paper plates, and old videos playing in the background. One of the videos showed Ozzy in 1983, making jokes on MTV, his eyes wild but kind. Everyone laughed, then grew quiet. No one wanted to leave. The legacy of the last note. Weeks passed, then months, and the conversation turned from mourning to legacy. The Villa Park show was released online by the family in August. Not as a monetized product, but as a gift, free to all. The caption read, "This was for you, all of you." Fans across the globe hosted public viewings. Parks, stadiums, theaters. Some watched alone at night, headphones in, tears falling quietly. For many, it felt like closure. For others, it reopened wounds. The footage was raw, no edits, no overdubs, just Ozzy as he was, worn, shaking, but filled with fire. Every tremor in his hand was visible. Every note he pushed out landed harder than any pyrotechnic. Musicians began to speak more openly about what Ozzy meant. Rob Halford said, "He didn't invent metal, he was metal." Billie Eilish posted a tribute. "I grew up hearing his voice on my dad's speakers. I didn't understand him, but I felt him." Schools began incorporating Black Sabbath into music history courses, not just as a band, but as a movement, as a rebellion against conformity, as proof that working-class kids from Birmingham could change the world. At Villa Park, a permanent monument was erected where the stage had once stood. It wasn't a statue, just a stone slab with 5 words etched in bold. "You gave us your all." People came from every corner of the world. Some left notes, others left guitars. One man flew from Brazil just to kneel before it and cry. Tony eventually returned to the studio, but he didn't start another project. Instead, he went through old tapes, unreleased demos, rehearsal recordings, forgotten riffs. He said it was like talking to Ozzy again. A year later, Sharon released a book, not a biography, a collection of letters. Ozzy's notes to their children, letters to fans, even notes he wrote to himself. Some pages were funny, others heartbreaking. One note simply read, "I'm scared of not being scared. Maybe that's when it's over." It became a bestseller. The funds from the final show.
He was all over the place between music and the TV show. The Osbournes, real rock icon.
Continued to grow. More donations came in. A research wing at the Birmingham Neurological Institute was renamed the Ozzy Osbourne Center for Parkinson's Study. Sharon opened it herself. She walked in alone. No photographers, just doctors, patients, and a picture of Ozzy hung above the entrance. His impact didn't end with his death. It spread, quietly, deeply, lastingly. The fans never let the light go out. Every year on July 5th, Thousands gather at Villa Park to celebrate Ozzy Night. They don't dress in black. They wear whatever they want. They play music, laugh, cry, and raise a glass. One young fan, only 17, stood on stage last year and played War Pigs on a cheap secondhand guitar. The crowd roared like it was 1970. In that moment, Tony said, "He's still here. He always will be." Because Ozzy Osbourne didn't just sing songs, he gave pieces of himself to the world until there was nothing left to give. He didn't go out in a blaze of lights. He went out in truth. The voice that won't fade. Even a year later, people still spoke about that final night, not just fans, but strangers. Those who had never met Ozzy or seen him live, yet somehow felt him close. His music had become part of their lives. Road trips, heartbreaks, celebrations, quiet nights. He wasn't a rock star to them. He was memory, defiance, comfort, and rebellion, all rolled into one. Radio stations played Black Sabbath tributes without prompting.
Black Sabbath itself also honored their lead singer on social media with the words, "Ozzy Forever."
Playlists labeled Ozzy's World gained millions of followers. Tattoos of his lyrics surged in popularity. One fan inked the words "crazy, but that's how it goes" across his chest. Another had the full set list from the Villa Park concert running down her arm. His grandchildren, still young, didn't fully grasp the magnitude of their grandfather's legacy. To them, he was the man who gave weird hugs, made them laugh, and sometimes fell asleep mid-story. Sharon said the most heartbreaking moment came when their youngest asked, "Why is Grandpa in the sky now?" Meanwhile, bands inspired by him began releasing albums. Not covers, but new material rooted in his energy. Some bands even added his image to their album art, like a silent guardian watching over the future of metal. One group from Tokyo called their debut The Omen of Oz, a chaotic blend of metal and synth pop that climbed international charts. Rock festivals began holding quiet moments in his honor. No music, just a minute of silence beneath the blazing lights. And yet, even the silence seemed to hum with his legacy. The unfinished song. In early 2026, a vault was opened. Sharon and Tony had agreed to release unreleased material if it honored Ozzy's standards. There were dozens of demos, songs half-sung, ideas whispered into old recorders. Some were no more than mumbles, others fully written tracks never produced. One, called Ashes to Iron, stunned everyone. Ozzy's voice, raw and emotional, cut through like steel. It wasn't about death, it was about transformation. Lines like, "If my body breaks, let my sound remain," left listeners in tears. Tony decided to finish it. He gathered surviving Sabbath members, producers, even orchestral musicians. But he kept it sparse. No overproduction, just rhythm, heart, and Ozzy's voice. When it was released, people said it felt like he was speaking from beyond. Not as a ghost, but as someone who had planned one final surprise. The song charted globally, not because it was promoted, but because people shared it with one another like a secret prayer. Ashes to Iron became an anthem, not of loss, but of resilience. Metalheads played it during funerals. Athletes trained to it. Some whispered it to themselves during hospital stays. A short documentary followed titled The Last Verse. It chronicled the making of that final track. Tony, Sharon, and others spoke about how they pieced the fragments together. "It was like decoding a farewell," one producer said. Schools began playing the documentary in music and ethics classes. Students wrote essays on Ozzy's influence not just on sound, but on spirit. One essay from a 14-year-old girl in Liverpool read, "Ozzy taught me that being broken doesn't mean being done. He was loud even when silent." That line spread. It was quoted in newspapers, etched onto murals, printed on limited edition posters. Eventually, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted Ozzy again, this time as a solo artist, posthumously. His children accepted the award. Kelly Osbourne, tearful yet strong, said, "He never wanted trophies. He just wanted you to feel what he felt." And everyone did. Memorial concerts were held across cities: New York, Berlin, Tokyo, São Paulo. But the biggest remained in Birmingham. That second annual Ozzy Night grew larger than before. Over 100,000 attended. And this time, a hologram of Ozzy closed the night. It wasn't a performance. It was just him speaking, a clip from years ago. "I don't know what comes next," the hologram said, "but I hope there's music." The crowd cried. Then they cheered. Because that's all he ever wanted, for the music to go on. Ozzy never claimed perfection. He never asked to be idolized. He just sang, screamed, stumbled, and always got back up. And when he finally couldn't, he sat in that black leather throne and gave the world one last echo, a voice that won't fade, a spirit that won't silence, a man who never truly left. The fire in the crowd. And so, with the crowd still roaring from that hologram message, "I hope there's music," the world seemed to understand that Ozzy Osbourne had not truly gone. He had simply changed forms, from flesh to memory, from voice to echo. His story was no longer just in his songs, but in the people who played them, sang them, and lived by them. 3 years after the final show, the third Ozzy Night shattered attendance records. Over 150,000 people gathered in Birmingham. Entire streets were closed. Massive speakers were rigged through every alley. And though there were headliners, bands from all over the globe, it wasn't about them. It was about the crowd. Because that night, the fans took over. From teenagers who only knew him through headphones to elders who saw him live in the 70s, everyone came together. Fans with guitars strapped to their backs, kids in bat costumes, elderly couples hand in hand, mouthing the words to "Mama, I'm coming home." No big screens, no corporate ads, just people united by sound. In the center of the park stood a new structure, a wall where people could write messages to Ozzy. It was painted black but lit by soft golden bulbs. Some wrote quotes, some wrote names, others simply left a handprint, and every year the wall grew. At midnight, something different happened. A fan, just 19 years old, walked to the center of the stage, alone. She introduced herself as Lily from Sheffield. "I didn't know Ozzy in life," she said, voice shaking, "but he saved me all the same." Then she played Dreamer on an acoustic guitar. No lights, no smoke, just her voice and 6 strings. By the second verse, the entire crowd sang with her. And it wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that's what Ozzy had always stood for. The final word. Months later, Sharon announced that she would be stepping back from public life. She had given everything she could to honor his memory. Now, she said, it was time to rest. In a final interview, she spoke quietly. "He gave the world more than it asked for. He never asked for anything in return. Now, I give him peace." Before retiring, she released one last thing, a letter Ozzy had written but never shared, not to fans, not to press, just to himself. It was found in an old notebook, dated just a week before the Villa Park concert. "If this is it, then let it be true. Let them feel it. Let them scream. Let them cry. Let them remember me, not because I was loud, but because I was real." The letter was published in full in Rolling Stone and translated into 24 languages. After that, Sharon disappeared from the spotlight. Her final public appearance was at the Ozzy Osbourne Center in Birmingham. She stood quietly beside the stone monument, laid a small black rose at its base, and whispered something only she heard. As for the rest of the world, Ozzy lived on. He lived in every riff blasted through bedroom walls. He lived in every whispered line scrawled on a notebook. He lived in every moment someone chose to be unapologetically themselves, and every year, more people discovered him. Young musicians with second-hand instruments, teenagers who felt like misfits, grandparents remembering wilder days. He was never just an artist. He was a companion, a rebel, a guide through noise and pain and triumph. People didn't ask, "Did you like Ozzy?" They asked, "Where were you when you heard him?" Ozzy Osbourne's story is not finished. Because legends like his do not end. They become part of us. They live in the chords that break silence, in the voices that rise when the world demands quiet, in the courage to stand up, laugh loudly, scream without shame, and say, "This is who I am." He reminded us that broken doesn't mean beaten, that chaos can be art, that music, when real, doesn't age. It just transforms. He was not perfect. He never tried to be. But he was honest. He was present. He stood on stage when his body could barely hold him, just to give the fans one more night. And in that act, he gave the world a rare and beautiful thing. A goodbye without goodbye. So if one day you're walking down a quiet street and hear a distant scream from a guitar amp, if you see a poster tacked to a wall, faded but still bold, if you hear a child belt out "Crazy Train" with no idea where it came from, that's him. Still here, still echoing. Because some voices don't fade. They roar forever. And Ozzy Osbourne? He was never just a man. He was the roar, the spark, the eternal echo. And in the heart of anyone who ever needed a song to survive, he still is.